All right. Well, as long as everyone's ready, let's get started here. I know we've got quite the packed session and a lot of information to go through. Just kind of a preview here is that I'm going to be going over a lot of the lessons learned and my experiences over the last 25 Zoom jury trials that we've been part of. We've been everything from a variety of live, socially distanced since July and after the pandemic, to that becoming a hybrid where we're doing, voir dire, or some people say voir dire, and then having everyone social or live and socially distanced to completely 100% Zoom. I will say that I cannot wait to get back into the courtroom and actually be live with a jury without having to wear masks. I think everyone here probably agrees that we cannot wait for that to happen. This presentation is not about if we should be doing all Zoom trials. I can definitely say that for criminal cases, probably wouldn't recommend it. But a lot of the ones, actually all of the ones that I've been working on so far have been some smaller to some larger mix of civil cases. And they've actually gone really, really well. There has been some hiccups, and I will go through those as well, but wanted to start with this here. I'm going to introduce myself so you know who I am. My name is Noah Wick. I am the National Director of Litigation Consulting for Trial Exhibits. I'm the person that you would call when you want to discuss your case initially, go over some themes, discuss the strategy, what graphics would be helpful for your case, and then also regarding the technology and what actually might be needed. I have over 15 years of nationwide experience doing litigation consulting. I have a master's degree. I was currently the immediate past president of the Washington Healthcare Risk Management Society, which is a subchapter of ASHRM for any of you medical malpractice folks out there, former vet. Actually, I have recently been presenting this nationwide as part of the BOTA's Masters in Trial Seminar, and have been honored to do that. Lastly, one of the things that I would definitely recommend you check out is the online Courtroom project. So if you end up looking that up, I am an advisory board member for that group, and we've been doing large virtual mock trials and as well as 2-day summits that go into a lot more detail of everything that I'm going to be going over in this session with retired judges, active judges, mediators, arbitrators, trial lawyers, trial consultants, you name it. And there's a lot of great information that we've been able to obtain from that as a nonprofit group. Moving on forward. So this kind of goes all the way back, and I have this as part 2. Some people may have seen part 1. I'm going to include some slides like this that go into part 1. A lot of things have changed since then. Now, I was giving part 1 series after I'd worked on the first jury Zoom trial that was in Washington State in last July. That was a 2-week trial that was continued in the middle of March. Due to COVID and everything shutting down. It was an auto accident admitted liability case that involved alleged damages to the driver and her 2 young children. So here we are, about a week and a half, gets postponed. We come back. The court ends up needing to reconnect with all those jurors to see who would be available. We found that at the end, only 8 of the 14 were available, that mostly due not to the technology, but because they were a bit older, and they knew that the way this was going to work in King County is they had to deliberate live in person than on Zoom. So we ended up doing the rest of the trial on Zoom, and then they had to come to the courtroom live to socially distance, and they just didn't feel comfortable at the time. But what we did do is we tested all the technology with them. We made sure that they had the right devices, that they had webcams and mics that worked, that they had decent internet that was stable. And I would say that the biggest takeaway from learning on this case was that it really gave me an idea of a jury that was half live, not socially distanced, and being able to ask them questions about their experience from that to being completely on Zoom for the rest of the testimony. And there's a lot more things that we can go into from the takeaways that will go at the end. But probably the biggest one is expert credibility, is that they felt as though they could better judge credibility when they were actually right in front of the screen here. Just because they're right, you could just see a lot more of the nonverbal communication, which I know some people will argue back and forth with, but I'll move on here. So for the defense, we had a system set up with dual monitors. So I had two monitors here. The one on the right was the slideshow view. That's the one that we would show any of the videos on. It was also the screen that we would be screen sharing, kind of like what I'm using right now. And then the left one was one that we used for all the jurors. So that way we had them up front, that we can keep a good look at them. We ended up using a webcam that was right above that monitor. So that way, when she was reading any of her notes or looking at the jurors, that she could really engage and try to look as though she's communicating with them, which is key. I sat next to her on the left-hand side with my presentation to be able to read up any of the exhibits, playing the video, and just basically just make sure that it goes really, really smoothly and not have too many hiccups. And if there was one, I would be able to fix it real quick. The bottom image here is what the jury was seeing from a presentation view. So imagine that being full screen on your monitor, probably similar to what you can see right now, and be able to go and progress through those slides while presenting her closing. This is a graphic that I created to hopefully better explain the process of jury selection in King County. We've actually been using this for some other states and kind of pushing it around. But the way that it works right now in King County is there's a jury service. So the court ends up sending out an e-list of 90 jurors plus. They end up receiving a shared or an agreed upon case-specific hardship questionnaire, which then they send back electronically. What we have, the bailiff here, I know people call it different in different areas, but it's not like an actual security person. It's the JA, judicial assistant, will end up returning those e-questionnaires filled out to counsel and to the judge. We'll end up having a day to review them. We'll have a pretrial conference, let's say on that Thursday, and then we'll end up having some of those jurors that have an excuse for hardship or cause brought in with an individual link one by one into the Zoom room that counsel and the judge are in. They'll ask some questions back and forth, and then they will end up being dismissed, and the bailiff will then decide, or once the judge decides to either keep them and put them as part of a panel or end up letting them go, they will find out later that night. Now, what you see is what it says day 4 or 5. This is when we would end up having all of the jurors that did not have technology, which was not many in a lot of our cases, would come in live into the courthouse and be able to fill out this questionnaire and then be put as part of a panel. The other panels would consist of anywhere from 8 to 15 jurors that would be brought in. They would end up receiving a link from the court and be brought into a breakout room. And when they were brought into the main room, right now, in general, for King County, as well as some of the other courts, it's been 20-20, 10-10 as far as asking questions. I would say that about each panel we've been able to get done within maybe an hour, hour and a half. There's benefits and positive things to this, while also some negatives. One of the things that I've seen, and one of the concerns I've had from some of the attorneys, is that when we do it by panel, that the opposing side then has a better idea of what kind of questions we're going to be asking the jurors, and might end up pivoting or changing their strategy accordingly. That works both ways. I mean, you might also find that you want to change your questioning based off of opposing counsels. And so one of the things that I've recommended counsel to do is to put together a list of different types of questions they want to ask, and then kind of mix it up amongst the different panels. So that way, the other side doesn't really guess ahead of time, and we can prepare ahead of time. oftentimes we end up getting a jury picked by that Friday and ready to start on Monday. So while this says day 1 to 6, really, I mean, you have some of the pretrial conference and motions and stuff for day 3, but really it's been only taking about a day to get through. It's a lot better than having all the people come to the actual location. I think that there's a couple things that I think won't change for at least this state moving forward, and hopefully some of the other states as well, is voir dire on Zoom has been really, really easy. We end up getting a lot more people that we wouldn't think would be involved, as far as the types of people that for federal cases, the geographical diversity has been dramatically different. And overall, the jurors have been happy to be involved with it and try these cases. I'm going to give a couple different examples of trials that we have worked on and what we ended up doing with them. This was a case in Clallam County where the courthouse wanted to use the gymnasium as for voir dire. So here we went to the location. We ended up mocking out the room and checking out the technology and what this was going to look like. Here's another view of what our mock-up would look like for that. This was the 3rd medical malpractice trial in Clallam County. Everyone came into the gym for voir dire, then back to the courthouse, socially distanced. And then we ended up receiving an order from the governor, Inslee, that everything needed to basically get closed down again. Since we were already in the middle of the trial, the judge decided to move everyone back into the gymnasium literally overnight. We heard at like 4:35 that was the decision. So there's a lot of technical difficulties that come with a large gymnasium. Anyone who knows a lot of technology, imagine the echo and the reverb that would come with it. Some additional things that made it a little bit more tricky was needing to use their gymnasium. So here's a screenshot of it via Zoom, since we had the claims professionals view it from afar. Hopefully everyone can appreciate the Bernie in the crowd here as a recent joke around here. But we ended up having a bunch of different views. We were plugged into their PA system. We had different Zoom people to testify on Zoom. And as far as feedback goes, we did have some issues, but we were able to fix that. We ended up having everyone needing a microphone. Overall, the trial went well, but it was definitely we've definitely had a lot of easier times doing it on Zoom versus this large and such a large area. Here's another case that we ended up having that was on the top floor, still using the courtroom, but in the presiding room. So really, really large room on the top of King County floor. This was a 4-week trial against Rick Friedman's trial team. If anyone's familiar with them, he's the one who wrote the rules of the road. And we ended up having to set up, so you see where the plexiglass is. We ended up having everyone turned around. So here's where we have the technology set up. We have multiple different screens. The attorneys, strangely, we actually had to have them face the jury, which were separated deep into the pews. And so their backs were against the judge and throughout the entire trial. We had most of all of the witnesses remote up on the screen testifying. And then I was located back in this corner, being able to bring up the exhibits. Another thing that we also ended up having, as this is kind of transitioning to where we are now, was we've been using a conference center or a convention center to start using the various different rooms to have live socially distanced jury trials. This was probably one of the last ones that were part of the Maidenbauer Center at this point. We were in a 5-week long medical malpractice trial, Zoom voir dire, and then live socially distanced. And it was the second medical malpractice trial in Washington State. So it was right before the other one. We ended up having a worst case scenario happen. 5 weeks trial, everything went perfect. During deliberations, about 2.5 days in, one of the jurors tested positive for COVID over the weekend. Awesome, great. We knew it was eventually going to happen at some point. Was hoping that it wouldn't be right after 5 weeks of testimony. And then they said, okay, well, let's start over. let's start for the deliberation process over. We brought an alternate in, and then first day back, one of the alternates and the foreperson end up coming in with a high fever, and it resulted in a mistrial. Yeah, I'm sure many of you are shaking your head going, oh my gosh, that, I mean, our hearts just sunk like that. Now the judge gave us the option of quarantining everyone for 2 to 3 weeks and restarting deliberations. But I think, any attorney out there were kind of like, no, I'd rather just mistry this case and start over again. I mean, that's just too long of a time of a break, especially that deep into deliberations. So that is what did end up happening on that. This is a picture of the deliberation room and their breakout room that they used throughout that process. I mean, everything was really clean. We had all the processes and things in place, but you just can't control what they do outside, and with everything going rampant. Now here is where we've transitioned into both the federal court and King County doing full Zoom jury trials. This is one of the technologies that we love, and what we've been using is a VeriDesk. We love these desks. You can grab the sides, easily be able to bring it up, bring it down. We'll usually set them up as a presenter, a platform, and I'm going to bring that up again later in the future here. But here you see on the bottom where we have the monitor that's going to show what your notes are, what your slides are, any of the exhibits. You end up having the positioned the camera right in between, and then having the jury right above. On the right hand side, this is what we had set up for voir dire, because we had larger views of the jurors on that big screen. We also had the jury consultant helping on this side that was using the left hand screen to be able to type notes of like, hey, follow up with this question, instead of just handing over notes on a notepad or something like that. It actually worked really, really well. And as far as a presenter station, this is what the setup I would recommend. What you see on the bottom left-hand side is a condenser mic. It's what I'm actually using right now. It's going to give you the best quality of audio, which I will go into and show you where you can find those as well here in a minute. So this is what it looks like to the jurors when she was presenting. So this is the view with the lighting. We had a bookshelf behind her, and then when you see, what the jurors don't see is this is all the stuff behind the scenes. So here we end up having the presenter station on the left hand side. Taylor, who's on this as well, was the trial tech sitting right here, and then you have the attorneys and paralegal set up around. Now, what's unique on this, and what we end up doing, is we have 2 monitors for each person. One so they can see what's being presented for the records, and the other one to be able to see the jury. All of this is duplicated, and the reasoning for that is that they didn't need to have any cameras on them being shown at the time. They had laptops that were there, and we set up a system. We're using Slack as an outside communication to be able to communicate back and forth between the different people, and including the claims people that are not present there in that room. This is a picture of a screenshot of what opposing counsel did. I thought it was really well done as far as the picture-in-picture broadcasting style. Really innovative. The issue that I saw with this is that the records and things that they were calling out during were very, very small and pixelated, especially since it's going to be a lot smaller on your screen. And I mean, even with jurors with iPads, let alone if they had an iPhone that they were viewing on this, it was impossible to see. But even with this being as large as possible, I think that it would have been better off if she actually swapped them, where she was smaller and still had a much larger view of it, while still being able to do the picture-in-picture. The other thing with this is if you try to do a picture-in-picture, which is a whole different type of software program that we end up needing to use, is it can slow down or bug a little bit, maybe pixelize things that normally wouldn't be. This is a picture of actually what I'm looking at right now, but what we've been doing is virtual mock trials, virtual focus groups, and being able to use our offices to be able to have people testify, and making sure that the bandwidth is good. This is Scott presenting. You can see where I'm using the OBS system. to capture it. Here's a picture from the camera and the notes. And then this is what he ends up seeing is his notes, what his slides are. We increase the size, the text size in the notes section, as well as being able to have a clear view of as though he's keeping eye contact with the audience while also having a view of the jurors on the right-hand side. And then in a separate room, we have a viewing room that we end up having the presentation and the jurors on another screen for all the rest of the counsel to watch. Going into how to present effectively. So now I'm going to go through some of the technology checks, things that hopefully this doesn't go over a lot of everyone's head, and I can stay after for as much time as you need to be able to clarify some of these things, because I know I'm going through a lot really quick. I will say that number one thing you need to do is if you're an attorney, use dual monitors. Don't just rely just on a single screen. If you do use dual monitors, make sure to go in the settings and click on dual monitors. Otherwise, the settings aren't going to work the way that you'd like them to be. Here's what, if you end up having dual monitors or an extra monitor on top of just your laptop, this is where you would still be able to see all the jurors while having another view that shows whatever the records are or whatever is being shared on the screen. As far as some of the equipment that I've used, we've tried 20 plus different webcams, even the 4K Logitechs, which are a tad bit more clear, but there's a lag, which makes them almost nearly unusable. But the Logitech C920 and the C922 have been the best ones we've come across so far, and it's what we end up using throughout all of our cases. So if you don't have one yet, I highly recommend you do. Make sure that the settings are in HD as well. And, these would be almost like a necessity if you're doing any type of hearings, remote depositions, anything like that. Now, with this type of webcam, you can download a thing called Logitech G Hub, and it's a software program for your camera to manually change the settings, including unchecking autofocus. And this has been one of those things that I've noticed for people that are presenting in court, if they're the type of person that is a swayer or someone who ends up moving back and forth, that sometimes the cameras or any camera will end up making you blurred and then try to autofocus you, and it's a little bit distracting. So you can actually uncheck this, and there's no other way to do it that I know of in the Zoom program, but you can uncheck it so that way it doesn't autofocus on you and make it distracting. You can also change the settings of how you look if your camera's way too far up away from you, or for instance, you don't want to have your face right in front of the camera. You can change the zoom so that way it does zoom into you from a distance. And I mean, ideally, you want to be kind of where I am at right now, where you can see my head, you can see my hands if I have them up, but I'm not super far back, and I'm not like super close where you can just see every little thing on my face. When it comes to mics, condenser mics are like night and day. So this is one of the things that I've learned. I'm using a Blue Yeti mic, absolutely love it. I'll give you an example. So if right now in real time, if I'm using my Yeti mic, I'm going to switch over to using just my webcam, which actually has a pretty decent mic. But as you can tell right now, the audio quality is probably vastly different than what you would hear if I now going back over to my Yeti mic. Hopefully everyone can hear the difference in that. If you had a choice between a really good webcam or a really good mic, I think that audio is really important for these jurors to be able to clearly hear what you're saying. And this is something that I will go with each one of your experts, your witnesses, to test beforehand to make sure, do they have a condenser mic? Do they have a laptop? Does it have good web Wi-Fi, or are they able to connect into a hard line? Do we have a webcam? Testing all those types of things and a checklist of it will ensure that if they do need to testify remotely, which I think in the future, it's been saving a lot of costs on travel, especially with schedule changes, that I think that's one of those things that if everything goes back to normal, that's the one thing that might end up staying and sticking. So Checking audio and mic levels. This can happen to me every time I restart my computer or I plug something different in. All of a sudden, I restart my computer right now, and it wants to use my my monitor that has speakers somewhere inside of it because it's a new monitor, and it wants to use that as the speaker source instead of using my actual speaker system. Or I end up using I reset and it goes to my mic using my webcam instead of using my condenser mic. These things, the speaker, the microphone, and the webcam are all settings that you want to make sure to test before you start a session that they're using the right one. Otherwise, it just causes more difficulties. Audio feedback, another thing that we've had to learn a lot throughout this. How do you end up making this better? Number one thing is have a presenter platform. So if you're gonna have multiple people, attorneys that are gonna be involved in there, have a presenter platform that is the only speaker source that all the sound's coming out of, that you have all the other microphones from people's Zoom or their laptops turned off. I mean, they could still have a picture and their webcam up, but turn everyone else's mics off. And if you absolutely need to have multiple people making objections or saying things, I would say your best bet is to separate the counsel into different rooms. It's unfortunate, but that way you can avoid any echoes, reverb, and sound issues. If you absolutely need to have someone in there, what you could do is use the Yeti mic that I have right now as a conference microphone. So you actually change the setting in the back to be a conference mic, which can hear from all around, up and down 360. The one thing with this is I've seen it where, let's say we're going to be using that microphone as a conference mic. It's going to be attached to one Zoom user. So therefore, if that Zoom user or someone else is speaking, let's say your partner across the room is speaking, but that condenser mic is connected to your account, it's still going to show you as the one that's speaking and not your partner. So there's kind of the trade-off, I guess. PowerPoint clickers. So when you are presenting a PowerPoint, one of the things we all practice it, make sure that everything's running smoothly, and we're used to using clickers. If you do use one and you're sharing your screen, you need to make sure to click on the shared screen at least once after you started sharing it. Otherwise, using the clicker, it's going to be thinking that the active program is Zoom. And therefore, when you start clicking, it doesn't do anything. And so you're wondering, crap, I just changed the batteries on this thing, like what's going on? And you kind of get that hot seat feeling that no one really wants. So know that more likely than not, everything probably is working as long as you tested before. It's just that you need to move your mouse over to the screen that's being shared and click on it once. How to properly use lighting and green screens. So over all these 25 different trials that we've been part of, a lot of the recent jury feedback from research as well shows that the opinions from the jurors is that if you are an attorney, not an expert or witness, but if you are an attorney and you're using a green screen and you're not using it appropriately, that they come back thinking that one, you're trying to hide something, or two, you're trying to put on a show, which is definitely not what we want. If you have limited options, try using a blank conference wall. Avoid being in front of or behind a window to watch for any glare. And the other thing that I've also noticed that make sure that your clothing doesn't match the background or has lots of different stripes on it. So earlier today, I put on a different type of shirt, and because it's not solid white, it looks as though my shirt's moving in vertical lines. And it's just something that happens. It's distracting. So in the future, if you're doing any Zoom presentations or hearings, just try to use solid colors, and you should be able to avoid that. For lighting, I know some people have used the ring lights. They can work great. I've also seen it where people use ring lights and it looks like they have lasers coming out of their eyes, and you see these big yellow rings on their pupils. Therefore, I don't end up using those just because what I do use is key light airs, which is the picture here. I can control if it's going to be warm or a cool setting, what the intensity is and the lumens, all based off of my phone. So it has gone really smoothly. They're not exactly expensive in any way. They're probably $100 each. But I would recommend getting 2 of those if you are going to be doing a lot more sessions at your location. So speaking of virtual backgrounds, Zoom in one of its latest features the last few months ago came out with this option to where you can import your PowerPoint presentation as your virtual background. Great thing is that you can kind of become part of your PowerPoint presentation and not have it side by side. The negatives to this is that it takes any movement, any animations, any transitions, and makes it a still image. So as you can see here on mine, I'll have this little thing move from left to right to show that I have some animations. If I want to click and add more bullet points, it's going to show each one as I click. If I end up using a virtual background and go this route, it's going to show everything all at once. So depending on the way that you like to present, it might not work well. Maybe it will work great. I would make sure that if you do use it, like here's a screenshot of me using a virtual background, that you have created a space for you to stay in one position throughout all of your presentations. So that way you're not covering any of the text or any important records or callouts. Went into this a little bit earlier for outside communications. I think that each person that's going in a trial needs to create a protocol for their communications that's outside of the meeting platform. So Messenger, iMessage, Google Hangout, Slack, any of those to be able to communicate with counsel, clients, the claims team, trial consultants, all in one location that doesn't really put you at jeopardy for the jurors being able to see your communications or anyone else. You can easily create a Slack channel and be able to have different hashtags for it. If you want to learn more about Slack, I recommend checking it out, or you can ask me some questions after as well. Preparing witnesses for Zoom testimony. I think this has a lot to do with also you as an attorney as well. Tech checks, internet speed. Go to speedtest.net and check what your internet speed is. More likely than not, you should always, if you're going to be doing any of these Zoom presentations, to plug an Ethernet cord directly into the wall or into the router. And don't rely on the Wi-Fi. If you have a Wi-Fi hub and it's hanging out somewhere outside of or like inside a closet, that's probably the worst place to have it. So take it out of that area. But the important thing to notice on this is that is your upload speed. So if your upload speed is low, let's say it's 10 megabytes per second, and then we end up having the download speed for all of the different jurors have 200 for download speed. Well, if you're the one that's presenting any of the video, any of the records, they're going to only be able to receive it as fast as you can upload it. I hope that makes sense. So if you have a slow upload, it might end up being laggy on their end as well, because they can only download it as fast as you can upload. So making sure that your upload speed is as good as possible. The other thing here, make sure you have the latest Zoom and Windows updates so they don't come up. There's features that are in each Zoom, and that if not everyone's on the same page, things might look different. Things might not work the way that you'd like to. As far as equipment, always have a backup for your internet. So if you have a MiFi device for work, make sure that you have that. That's just like a hotspot, an internet hotspot you could bring around with you. Know how to use your cell phone as a hotspot. A lot of people don't know how to do that. If you have an iPhone, you can do it. But be able to set it up when you get a second, set it up as a hotspot and connect your laptop to it, and just know how that works in case your internet goes down. We would hate, things happen, tech fails. It is what it is. But we always want to have multiple different ways to have a backup plan to keep the process moving and not have too much interruptions. So first choice, MiFi device. Backup choice, know how to use your cell phone. And third, at all possible, make sure you have the call-in number available and easily written down somewhere to access in case you are part of a Zoom session with a jury and your internet goes down and you need to call and let them know what happened. So one of the things that I've also noticed has been successful is practicing your direct and cross with a trial consultant, with your experts, being able to bring up the records. Do they know how to annotate and use the annotation skills if they need a markup on it? Let's say you have an expert that you'd like to have them circle or point to an exhibit that you're showing or sharing and interact with it. A great example would be using an MRI with a radiologist and be able to have them, circle up on the chart, or be able to remote control to use the DICOM player accordingly and be able to go through the slices without, skipping a beat. You can also save those images and any of the markings out and submit them as an exhibit in some cases. So here I'm taking a quick little note. Everyone that's on here, please write down technology. I'm always gonna have some people that ask me, I missed the keyword. Keyword, technology is going to be the keyword. And when I send out the survey at the end, that hopefully you can remember to write down technology as the keyword. So that way I can guarantee with any of the bar associations, if they ask me, that you were paying attention. Going into some top tips, controlling mute and unmute. This is under the audio settings. This allows you to, you can either quickly tap the space bar to mute and unmute, or you can hold it down to temporarily do it. So if I'm muted and or you are and you need to make an objection, I might just have it to where I'm muted and then I hold it down for a second, objection, blah, 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 and let it go and you're muted again. This is key to help the process moving forward and don't have like different interruptions. One of the things that we constantly had in one of the trials was opposing counsel was never muted and they kept receiving emails, and you'd hear this big ding sound that was really, really annoying for everyone and would kind of take over, which leads to the next actual fix that we have here is now they have on screen share, especially to silence your system notifications. So if I have my email up right now and I'm receiving emails, that you don't hear me receiving all the emails, that it's silenced. The next thing has to do with screen sharing. This one's a bit tricky, but if you decide to share one of like your PowerPoint or a video that has any sound, you have to make sure to click on this share computer sound, which is not going to be clicked by default. If you end up showing any video and that's not shared, it will kind of sound muffled. No one can really hear what it is. And this will resolve that. What ends up happening technology-wise is that it's basically trying to pick up, your mic is trying to pick up the sound that's coming from your speakers, which is why that's muffled. Versus if this is check marked, it's actually using it. You can turn up the volume as much as you want on your end, and it doesn't change that for the participants and viewers. What to avoid? So we've come across this on a couple different trials. One was from my good friend Ted, who came across where the attorney needed to share their screen for an exhibit, but instead shared their entire Outlook inbox for everyone to see. Nothing risky about that at all, but there's some better ways to do it. And it's just to make sure that you know what you're sharing, that you're not sharing programs or sharing a full screen if you're trying to do just a program. Another example is that if you are going to be using a Slack or outside communication, use a different, not only just on a different monitor, but just use an actual different laptop if you can. This way that if someone does decide to share, if you end up deciding to share your screen, that it doesn't accidentally show all of your internal communication with everyone that's there. So this is a fun example. This was from my first trial that I was part of, where opposing counsel was delivering their closing, and it was about 3.5 hours long, so super, super lengthy. We ended up having it where this blank white screen was shown for about 45 minutes before other bullet points came up. One of the jurors sent an email to the bailiff and the judge during the plaintiff's closing argument, and the email said verbatim, the screenshot or the screen share showed a blank white screen, and now that I'm seeing other slides, I believe I was missing other presentation material. Will these materials be available during deliberations? Judge then explained that this was plaintiff attorney experiencing challenges on their end, but not a mechanical glitch of Zoom. Therefore, the material would not be provided as it was on the user's end. He then followed up with great news, counsel, is that they're paying attention. Bad news is that they're emailing during closings, and they were kind of scorned on that a little bit too. But rightfully so. I get it. If I was sitting there watching this, and then all of a sudden later on, bullet points started popping up, I'd be wondering what I was missing. Number 4, understand host control and privileges. So this is something that is probably more with the court than you, but you might want to be familiar with it. So under the security tab, assuming you have a pro account, a lot of courts will have it to where people are muted upon entry. But like right now, I don't have this unchecked. So anyone can actually unmute themselves and say whatever they need to say. But by default, this is checked. And it's kind of like one of those double negatives in some ways, where in order for you to make sure that people don't unmute themselves and start checking and start saying things, or someone that's not supposed to be part of the session gets in and starts Zoom bombing by unchecking this and start saying what they want, just make sure that unmute themselves is unchecked, and you'll be safe there. Another thing, another way of going about that as well is to go into participants and then allow, uncheck, allow participants to unmute themselves. This also happens where people get Zoom bombed by screen sharing. So this doesn't seem like it's really straightforward. If you're part of the court and you go, counsel needs to show or screen share their presentation, they go to screen share and then it says, okay, which screen you want to share? They're like, no, I don't want to do mine. We need to have someone else's. So then they click on that little caret there and it says, okay, you can either, who can share, only host or all participants. So they say, well, I don't need to share my screen. So I'm going to go to all participants. This is where bad things happen. That now allows anyone that's part of the session to be able to screen share their whatever they want to show. And the way to avoid this and know how to is if the court wants to allow counsel to share a PowerPoint, a video, whatever, they need to go to the participants, find that attorney that's going to be the one who's sharing, go to more, click on make co-host. And that doesn't mean that now they can just do whatever they want. You'll still have, as a host, as the main host, you'll still have full control over that session, but allows that attorney to be able to share what they need to without allowing everyone else to be able to do so. Once they're done, they can easily also go back and withdraw the co-host permission so they can no longer share. So that's kind of the way that the court should do it or should handle it moving forward. Again, I'm going to present all of this as a PDF after this, so you have this to go through. Just kind of go really quick through these so you understand the different views and settings that a jury might see. First is the speaker view. And then we have the gallery view. So that's where we have multiple people on. This is a gallery view with screen share. So if you're the person that's screen sharing and you're in a gallery view, this is what you would see of a bunch of people on the top. If you want to go to a speaker with screen share, you have two different options. We can have the side-by-side, or we can go to the side-by-side gallery. So with a speaker view side-by-side, and hopefully you see this on mine as well, there should be this little notch right here that you can actually click on and be able to drag left to right to make my presentation larger or smaller. Granted, I have actually spotlighted myself, so it might be different on each one of your computers based on which version you have. But the other option is if you're not seeing side-by-side view, you can go to options at the very top if you move your mouse up there and click on to enable side-by-side mode. Again, you'll have this bar where you can change the size for each one. This is one of those things that each juror has the ability to interact and be able to make what they see larger or smaller. And unfortunately, there's only a couple different ways that we can really manage that and control it. But it involves us using a different system as a virtual camera. And it's really techy, and I don't think we need to really go into that. But there is a way to make sure that everyone's looking at the same exact thing the same way. But in most courts, this is the options that they will have. Again, here, and this is what it looks like as a side-by-side gallery. We have pinning and multi-pinning now available, where you can actually choose who's going to be pinned to it. Also note on here that if you find your picture on here and you go to hide self view, know that it only hides the self view from yourself and not from everyone else that's part of the session. So mistakes have been made by people, some people on the internet and news that I'm sure you've heard. But to make sure that, and note that hiding self-view, it doesn't really hide you to everyone else. If you want to do that, make sure to stop the video instead of just going and relying on that feature. Also, up on the view options next to the side-by-side mode, this is where you have options to request remote control or give permission for your expert to have control over your computer to be able to manipulate whatever they need to as far as the exhibits, as well as allowing them to annotate. How to use multi-pin and spotlight. This is another one of those things where you can pin up to 9 participants. You want to use a dual monitor, and there's probably more and more features that are coming out with this right now. But ideally, if you end up having 9 jurors as part of your session and you want to have them as large as possible on a screen, this is one way to do it. And you can have multiple different screens of different pinnings. Another thing that I've been had the pleasure of working with General Counsel over at Zoom and their tech team is adding more. This was back in August, adding more flexibility to how we handle voir dire. In the past trials, it was set up to where we'd end up bringing from the different jurors into the room, and then all of a sudden, one juror that you're asking questions is number one speaks, and then another juror speaks, and you look down, you look back up, and it's like a game of musical chairs, and they're all over the place. And now we can actually move them where we want them to be and have them stay in that desired order. The judge can also oftentimes do that as well, and then control that order so that way everyone sees the same exact order. So a little bit less confusion. If you can't move them, I mean, if you do move them, you can see a hand where you can move each person back and forth. If you cannot see that and it shows a mouse, that means that your non-video participants are hidden. So you would need to click on those 3 dots and unhide them in order to be able to move people accordingly. How to use breakout rooms. So this is one of those things where you can now pre-assign breakout rooms when scheduling a meeting through the web portal. So that's not based off of the actual Zoom program, but in the app, but through the actual website. This is what the court has been doing to be able to create a breakout room for just the jurors, or creating a breakout room for just the judge and counsel. For instance, if we've had situations where it's easier to have a breakout room for the judge and counsel to move into that room to show anything that they need to show for impeachment, have a sidebar, whatever, without putting all the jurors in a separate room. One of the things that we have learned too is that that if the judge and the counsel move to a breakout room, to make sure that the judicial assistant's still there within that room. Especially if you end up having any type of experts. I heard a case recently where the experts started talking to them, which would be a huge no-no. Their other alternative is just to swap and have them go to a different room. How to make visuals more powerful. And these are just some of the different graphics and things that we've used in these recent cases to really help visually make our point. It might be something where we have a timeline with creating medical demonstratives. Oftentimes in a lot of these cases, attorneys will hand me either a mediation brief or an outline of their opening, and I will take that and completely revamp it into something that's going to be powerful and a powerful impression visually for you to go along with. That shouldn't have a bunch of bullet points like this, but let's say we need to explain what diabetic ketoacidosis is. Well, I'll take that and I will create it into a slide that pops up one by one to explain what that is. Another example is simple things like informed consent process. A lot of the things that you live with a case for years, and you just feel like as though you know everything about it, but you end up going in front of a jury and they have no idea what you're talking about. So there's a lot of things that we take for granted that we know. Explain what the different steps of an informed consent process is. Showing clinical features. So this was to show the clinical features of a doctor and what they may see in a patient with a pulmonary embolism. So I start talking about a PE resulting in a DVT, And that might go completely over your head if you don't work on medical cases at all. So be able to explain some of those things. Here is something we come up often is what is a differential diagnosis, and explain, okay, well, patient comes in with symptoms. The doctor comes in with a list of possible causes to that. What could it be? They prioritize the suspect list. What's more likely, less likely, what's urgent, not urgent danger. Switch those up. And then we start a rule out process. And this is where we're doing medical tests. We're using up to date to kind of figure out which might be the actual diagnosis. But being able to explain that, here is an example of showing a picture of your expert or someone that's testifying, or maybe your client, and be able to summarize opinions, be able to give some background instead of having a bunch of bullet points that are non-visual about who they are, what they've done, etc. And then here we have it matched in and sliding with callouts of the various different records and highlights. It doesn't take a lot of time, but it's a lot easier, a lot smoother than just having bullet points that are plain. Here is an example of geographic indication. So this has to do with some coffee beans and using examples to make some metaphors with. What's the Lanham Act? Explaining what that is based off the records. This was Kona Coffee versus Worldwide, and this type of beans. And I'm clicking a little bit faster, so it ends up going through. But you get the idea of just trying to make things a little bit more visual. More callouts from interrogatories, for instance. Here is an example of what you would see using Trial Director or On Cue, which I'll show you an example here in a second. How we introduce and admitted and used exhibits. So in federal court, we've been using box.com, at least in Washington. In Superior Court, we've been using ShareFile. I've also seen people use Ignite. This is all what we end up using for submitting our pre-admitted exhibits, and then also something that we end up uploading things in real time for impeachment. Jury engagement management. This is something I get a lot of questions about too. How do you keep your jury engaged? Or how do you know they're not on their phone, or they're not searching the web, or playing with their kids or something like that? Well, first thing is that they always need to have a camera on. If for whatever reason their camera starts lagging or stops, the judge will stop everything instantly and say, we need to make sure that juror number 14 has their camera on so we can see them. They'll ask and have things like, please don't be eating and taking a break. Pretend like as though you're actually in court, in the courthouse. Don't be doing anything besides focusing completely in here. And then make sure they're in a position or an area where they can be not disturbed. So the judge and the bailiff have been really good in all the cases that we've been part of really making sure that they're paying attention. And then really calling them out if they're not. The other thing that we've seen is that they've banned the use of virtual backgrounds in most of these cases for jurors. We don't know if someone's behind them, if someone else is watching. So this has just been one of those things that they've been forcing. Another trick thing that they've been using is brightness of the screen. So if I have everyone up on my screen right now, and then all of a sudden someone's face just goes super bright or super dark compared to what everyone else is seeing, you would probably get an indication that, hey, they might be looking at something different than what they're supposed to be looking at. So that has been kind of one of those hidden secret tricks to make sure that, okay, it looks, someone starts, going to different sites, and we want to maybe just take a break then and say, hey, it's about time for one. So feedback, jurors love the technology in all these different cases. I would say that all the attorneys no one's really been looking forward to doing a Zoom jury trial, but the jurors, the judge, and even the attorneys have all had a great experience, and it was unanimous. As far as the jurors in federal court, we've had more geographical diversity and willingness to participate. We've heard most positive feedback from the side that has visually shown their case and being able to actually connect and watch and look at the jurors directly at the camera. I know it's a whole new type of trick to be able to do, and it's different, but we can work with you to make sure that you are going to be the best version of yourself on any Zoom presentations. Social distance versus Zoom. One of the other things we keep hearing back, and I mentioned this before, is that when we had Zoom sessions, everyone can see you clearly. When you have all the jurors, I mean, try to think of another scenario where you could have all the jurors as tiles right in front of you, where you can just stare at them. And I guarantee you, if you went in court and you just, someone else was speaking and you were just staring at them, you might look a little bit creepy. But here you could be as creepy as you'd like, and they have no idea that you're staring at them. And they could be doing the same thing right back at you. So I think that having someone right in front of you on here, you can better judge their credibility than 50, 100 feet, 200 feet away with a mask on. And at least that's what we're hearing back and forth. Live Zoom testimony. Also, we heard feedback that they preferred live testimony versus trial preservation depths and even being socially distanced. Jurors could tell when attorneys were showing versus reading a script, which can seem really, really obvious. And the number one takeaway that we had from all of them is we appreciated the side that was able to avoid the fluff. So those that just appreciate our time, get to the point, stop asking the same question over and over again, and just avoid the fluff of the situation to get this trial done with. Last thing I want to do here is I'm going to stop my screen share, and I'm going to show you an example, excuse me here, of bringing up exhibits on cue, with on cue. So if we're in trial together right now, share sound, viewer, great. Okay, everyone should be able to see a blank black screen. So you say, hey, Noah, let's bring up exhibit 201. And I have it pop up here. You say, okay, let's call out that second paragraph. Boom, and let's highlight engineer's responsibilities. Or I follow along with you for whatever you need to say. And then we want to take this and put it side by side with the cover page of deposition testimony. So here I could go actually just change the different photos or the different pages and be able to make a call out. And again, highlight. It's as easy as that. There's a lot more different technical things within it. And here's another example where it's blank screen and you want to be able to show a video from this, this page to that page, or line by this line.
What type of duties did the plaintiff perform?
She was a caregiver, so she would come on shift and she would be available in the dining room for breakfast and lunch to be serving, and then providing any shower assistance that was necessary for the residents she was assigned to, toileting assistance, laundry assistance, and then any AM care, grooming tasks, things like that, getting people dressed.
Was she a good employee?
She was.
What made her a good employee?
I mean, I watched her, she and I had provided care.
And I will stop it right there. And I want to thank everyone for your time. Hopefully that was a good preview, and I'm sure many of you have lots of different questions. I'm sorry, I'm trying to run a million miles an hour here. There's a lot of content. So let me see. I'm going to answer some of the questions that we have here. One, have you found the Zoom jurors to be cooperative and engaged? Absolutely. You are going to have that juror. When you start keeping things really, really dry, when we had someone, opposing counsel had a transcript, a depo transcript that they end up reading for 4 hours line by line. Really? So, you end up having one of those jurors that's just kind of like starts laying their head on their couch. And you get it. You have to try to engage them just like you were in court. Try to make them, focus in on what you're saying. Let's see here. Other questions. Are you available Are you available for variations to other bar groups? If you know anyone who is interested in me presenting to the rest of your firm or doing for a presentation for your bar group, I'd be more than happy to, as long as I'm not in trial. And at no cost as well. I really hope that everyone finds value in this. My goal truly is to make sure that hopefully we can get this whole process moving forward. I've heard from a lot of different courts that they're not even going to be planning on doing jury trials that are civil trials until maybe 2024, and that with the criminal docket being backed up, that those dates aren't even realistic. It's going to be more like 2025, 2026. And that should make everyone cringe.